Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express. It's Tuesday and we like to talk about your money every Tuesday. So today we are joined by Maxwell Kihara, who's a personal finance coach. He is in our I&M studios. Welcome to the show, Mr. Kihara. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Now, we're going to talk about your money. And, of course, personal finance is something that many of us learned huge lessons about, particularly from the period of 2020 all the way to 2021. And, of course, as everyone goes about their entrepreneurial, entrepreneurial ventures and their personal finance ventures, and they try to build themselves up, whether they have a career or business or even are trying to get a job, there's certain important things that they need to keep in mind. And perhaps let's just talk about, go back to 2020 when the unexpected happened. Economies were shut down both in the country and beyond because of the pandemic. And of course, this was meant to protect the people, but at the same time, it wreaked havoc on on our pockets and local economies. So my first question to you would be, how does one plan for the unexpected?
Thank you very much. One of the things I'd like to say is this guest call emergency never announces himself.
True.
He just shows up. He never RSVPs, he'll just show up. And I think that Kenya and the world at large experience this bit. So what I would say is we can never fully plan for an emergency, but we can have some risk mitigating factors. So one of the things we need to do in our planning and budgeting is to have an emergency fund. That's the first step we need to take, just to ensure that we can cover a bit. Maybe we won't do the best, but for sure we will have something to cushion us. The second bit is always have a financial plan. Have a budget, have a long-term and a short-term plan, so that in this instance, when we have this budget and this happens, I can go to my budget and look at which expenses are not necessary for me now, right? So having an emergency fund is key.
Okay, so let's talk about the short term. And is it different from when you have a steady income or when you're just depending on business, which is a bit different? I mean, how should one approach the short-term personal finance plan?
All right. The short-term plan, I would say, especially for those people who are affected, maybe those people who've been laid off, retrenched, or your company closed, one of the first things we need to do is to look at our budget so that we can look at the expenses and ensure our shilling is stretched the most.
Right.
So eliminate those things that we need to do. Number two, if you're paying loans, you have debts, you can approach these institutions and tell them where I am. This is where I am. What can we do about this scenario? Will you give me a holiday break? Maybe you've been paying your policy, insurance policies. You can go to them and tell them, I would like to take a break for this moment. Give me a break, so that the little amount we have in our coffers can be used to the maximum.
And then there's the long term. What does that look like? Mr. Kihara, can you hear me? The long-term financial...
I can hear you.
Yes. How does that differ from the short-term financial plans? Talk to us about how one should approach their long-term financial plans if they're looking to prepare for the unexpected. You said that an emergency, you cannot really expect the unexpected, but at the same time, what does the long-term plan, what do long-term plans look like, and how should one approach it to ensure that they are not caught flat-footed?
So the long-term plan should be at least around what we have for 5 years and above.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years. Maybe someone is planning for their retirement plan, or someone is planning that in the next 5 years, I want to be employed, but after that, I want to get out of employment and run my own business.
Okay.
So we will have a financial goal of how my budget would look like, what are my financial objectives. Then the long-term goals becomes very essential because it guides us in our short-term goals. So when I come to my short-term goals, I'm advised, because of where I want to be, this is my goal, this is my focus, this is where I want to get at. This is the stream of income I have. Can I get to where I want to get? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So the other option is to have some multiple streams of income. And this is one thing I would encourage, especially our fellow Kenyans. Sometimes look at the gift you have, the skill you have, right? Maybe you're good at music. You can do something that will earn you some money, okay? Then when you come to the short-term goal, we work strictly with the budget. And I know sometimes working with the budget, especially in Kenya, people will want to say, you know, tumia pesa ikuzoee. You know, we have such sayings and idioms that really work against us. Okay?
Right.
So I'm not saying, and most of the times when you tell people about budgeting, the first thing they say is, you don't want me to enjoy life. How can I enjoy life if I'm budgeting? The actual fact is, when you have a budget, you actually get to enjoy better. For instance, if I want to go for a holiday in the next 2 years, I have the ability and the opportunity to plan for the next 2 years. I have the opportunity to book early and get fair discounts for the same price that if you came for the holiday, booked it 2 weeks before, you'll probably pay almost twice as much. So we have to stick to this budget in the short term so that we can not only achieve our short-term goals, but at the end of it, the long-term goals.
Absolutely. And of course, speaking of long-term, saving for retirement is something that a lot of people usually put off for a later day, but then they're caught flat-footed when it turns out that they should have started earlier. So how early is early for someone who wants to have a comfortable long-term plan, especially in view of their retirement period?
I think the best time to start is now. Whatever age, the best time to start is now. You can start it at 18, you can start it at 23. The earlier, the better. But that said, even those of us who will join in the wagon at your 40s, at your 50s, you still have an opportunity to do something about your sunset years. So the best time to start is today. And the best way to go about it is decide, what do I want for my future? Right? Usually when you ask people, wow, what is success? What is financial breakthrough or financial liberation? Most people will say lots of money. You see, lots of money is ambiguous, right? So for every one of us, we've got different needs, we've got different wants, different plans, different ideas for our retirement. So for one is to sit down and decide, this is how my retirement plan looks like. I want to live in such a house. I would like to drive such a car. I would like for my children, if they would be going to school, to go to this particular university. So once we go to the future and plan where we want to be, then we can come back and look at, okay, this is what I am looking at. So how do I work towards this goal? So you can talk with a personal finance coach, or you can go to a class that teaches on personal finance planning. But the gist of it is, now that I see where I'm going, I'm able to say, this is where I am, this is what I have, and this is what I can work with. Right? Then I can look at what things, for instance, during this period, maybe someone has lost their job. Someone can look at, what do I need to remove from my budget so that I can stretch my shilling longer? So let me give a good example. In every budget, we'll have expenses. We have needs and we have wants. There are those things that are very essential. They are most essential, we cannot do without, like rent, food, school fees. Those are things that we cannot do without. Then we've got other things that are necessary but not really. For example, I need to go and see my barber. Maybe I need to do some pedicure. But when things are tight, I can look and decide, do I really need to see a pedicure? Do I really need to go to that place I usually go and pay this amount of money when I can pay a third of it and get the same service? So we really need to agree and look hard at our budget and at ourselves and make those hard decisions. But they're not hard decisions because they'll accord us a comfortable life for the longest.
Yes. Now, as you say that, also you're talking about cutting down, but there are people who don't even have that emergency fund that you shall be budgeting for. So could you explain to our viewers, before you're even dealing with a situation where you have lost your job or your source of finance, how do you save? How should you save for an emergency?
Sorry, just come again.
Yeah, you're talking about a budget for perhaps a time where you have lost your source of income, right? So as you do that, then you are planning for a surplus that you had. Let's say maybe you have been saving for, savings of a certain amount. So how do people approach that? What should people be aware of in terms of a need to save for such emergencies? Should they be putting aside a certain amount of money? Should they be putting their money into a circle or a fund? How does one approach ensuring that they shall be safe enough to have even the little they shall be budgeting for when they lose a job or something of the sort?
The first place to start is the golden rule that has been there for ages.
Yes.
Paying yourself first. That's what you need to do. Any money that comes to you, the first thing you need to do is to pay yourself first. And I usually say, if people are as effective as the government, when you get your payslip, the government has already taken their chunk, right? The system is so effective, how would it be if every time you'd get your salary and the government expects you to take the taxes to them?
Yeah.
We probably would not have any government in place. So we really need to come up with such a discipline, a rigor of discipline, that every time any money comes to me, I have to pay myself first. And paying myself first means I have to save. And recommended is 10%. If you're beginning, start with 10%. So it doesn't matter if I'm getting $1 million or I'm getting 1,000. Ensure 10% of that money is put aside, then it's put in savings, all right? That is how we can get some amount of money that we are able to save. Then from there, I can take my money and create an emergency fund where I'm working with 3 to 6 months of my income. Once I have raised that, then I can go and check out my debts, because the greatest obstacle to you building your financial wealth is debts. So we need to tackle our debts, ensure we are not accumulating debts that are not necessary.
Okay.
And ensuring that we are paying the minimum, and then from there, not from the 10%, from your salary, ensure you can, when you save from the unnecessary expenses, that money is taken directly to your debts. Attack your debts first.
Okay.
So if I'm able to save another 5 or 6% from expenses that are not necessarily, I've stopped eating lunch in town. I'm carrying my packed lunch.
Yeah.
I've stopped doing unnecessary shopping. So I've saved 2,000 here, 4,000 here, 5,000 here. This goes to attacking your smallest debt so that you clear it. Once you clear every debt, it gives you some motivation, some inspiration to continue doing that.
Okay. And how is it even possible to save during such difficult times, such as, let's use the pandemic as a case in point?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the first place to save from is our expenses. And that's why I keep saying, let's go to our budget. Look at your budget. How much are you spending? Where are you spending at? We have to go through it with a fine comb and decide, is this expense really necessary at this time? One of the things we've discovered is most of us probably, have lunch in town, then the hotels were closed. You had to carry lunch or look for a way to, sort yourself. Then that enlightens your mind that I don't need to eat in town. I don't need to go to eateries, okay? So maybe I can come with my food and save some money. In one of our class that we had, I remember someone saying, when they went through this, because one of the things we do is to go through track your expenses.
Yeah.
Not just budget, because when we budget, I'm going to put down things that I think this is what I'm spending on, these are the bills that I'm paying. But when I track my expenses, I realize I've always thought Uber is cheap, but how many times am I using Uber in a day, right? I've always thought when I go to this fancy restaurant with my 2 friends and enjoy, it's not so much. But when I sit down, I realize that cost will total to around 15,000, 12,000 in a month. Okay, so yes, we can still save in this pandemic situation by going through our budget, tracking every expense every day, and then adjusting our budget accordingly. So you will definitely find a lot to save. That I can guarantee you.
Absolutely. And last but not least, the pandemic has posed a lot of problems that many people had not encountered before. But of course, with those comes lessons. What would you say are the biggest lessons that people can learn from this pandemic period, and perhaps that would inform how they handle their finances moving forward?
Several lessons that I've picked during this period. Number one, I think it's now clear to anyone that an emergency can happen.
Yeah.
That this guest never announces himself. He will never RSVP us to tell us he's coming. But we need to have a room for him in our house. So the way to go about it is to create an emergency fund, where we usually propose at least 6 months of your saving. Always have an emergency fund for this guest. Like we said, he will never announce himself. Number two, I think Kenyans have also realized that probably my stream of income is not enough, because one of the things that happened is people also got pay cuts. So which other avenue can I use to create money? And there are many options we have. Our gifts, our skills, our knowledge. You know, you can package your knowledge and sell it. For example, I can share what I'm sharing it, put it online, and sell it.
Indeed.
There are many options.
Yeah.
So we have to look for the streams of income that we can accommodate, you know, just to improve our income in the family or the household. That's the second thing. The third thing is always track your expenses. Always track your expenses. Then the other thing that we've seen is, because this thing has come, I've just realized I'm living in a house where 80% of our income goes. Then maybe it's time for me to reevaluate my life and decide, is my life sabotaging my future? Because if I'm spending 80% on rent, then I will definitely not have enough to save for my tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So we need to reevaluate our lives and check out what is necessary, what can we change, what can we tweak, what can we improve on, so that tomorrow I have a better future. And finally, and most importantly, we need to keep the future, the goal, the vision, always at the front, so that the decisions or financial decisions we make today will support us in the pursuit of that future goal and that future vision.
And lastly, Mr. Kihara, you're a personal finance coach. Could you speak to the need of seeking professional advice? If you find yourself drowning in terms of finance, there's no shame in seeking out help, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have our quote. We have a quote in my community that says, "Someone advised is someone who is wise."
Yes.
And most of the times, you can be a professional. For example, you're a professional in your area of calling, where you're working, you're interviewing us, you see it flows out from you. The same way, someone else is well versed and trained in that particular field of personal finance.
Right.
They are able to advise. For example, this is the amount of money I have. I've been putting it here, and this is the returns, the sort of returns I'm getting. And you can tell them, did you know we've got bonds that will give you around 13.2%, right? So if you're not planning to use this money for now, why don't you put it in the bond system? Maybe you've just taken retirement. You don't want to take your whole amount and put it in business when you're 65 or 70 years old. You do not have that energy, and you cannot afford that risk. It is working with your coach that will help you realize, I can put this money here and get this stable income for myself and my family, and I can afford to take maybe 10 or 20% and put it in this venture. Even if I lose it, I still have this comfort of these returns that I'm getting every year or quarterly or monthly.
Right.
Right. So the beauty about talking to these guys, there's no shame about it. It's actually the best way, because you want to maximize what you have to get the best yield, the best return from your savings. And you've not been doing that for the last 30, 40 years, and this person has been doing this for their lifetime. And they will never force you to make a decision. All they will do is put the array of options for you, show you this track, this path leads to point A. This path leads to point B. You are at this age, these are the best options for you, think about it. So I would encourage for guys to look for these opportunities, talk to a financial therapist, and sit down and agree and just hear him out on how we can best maximize what we have today.
Absolutely. Thank you.